Alright. I have no idea how this is gonna go, so we are gonna try it. To start off, my name's Megan. I'm going to be working on a project here in NodeJS. I have started nothing on it, so we're basically clean slate, although I have installed Node, so I do have that going for me. But basically, on my setup, I have my text editor here. I've got a command prompt for basically running scripts. And then I have set up a Google view, which is honestly going to be probably the most used view of this stream. Because most of it is just going to be me looking up how to do what I do, because I've been doing this for 10 years and I still rely on Google. And that is kind of basically the whole point of this. My intention with this is not to create a tutorial or really anything polished. It is mostly to introduce people who haven't really seen coding being done to how a project works, what the process kind of looks like, what some of the tools look like, and kind of what the thought process that goes into it looks like. Because there's a lot to it that I don't think people realize when you look and watch an edited video of the best case scenario go through. So yeah, that's basically it. The project I'm going to be working on is essentially a library of tools, which is why I decided to go with Node. If you know anything about programming, NodeJS is basically server-side JavaScript, and it's what I use at work. I was going between it and PHP, but NodeJS works a lot better with creating libraries, in my opinion, because NPM makes it very easy to create things to share, and PHP, it's a little less intuitive to use in a modular pattern, which is basically how I'm intending to write this. The outcome of this project basically is I want to create a toolbox for myself to create websites with specific purposes in mind. And when you go about coding something, if you get to the point where you're trying to, beyond just write something that works, you want to write something that works well and that other people can use, you really start to think about code in terms of kind of like Legos, where you create a piece and each piece does something, and then you combine these pieces to create a program or a website or whatever you want to make. So yeah, that is basically the purpose of this. We're going to be creating a NodeJS library using probably MySQL for the database. I have not actually gotten that far yet. MySQL is probably the database that I have the most experience with, so it's probably what I'll end up using, because I've gotten to the point on this project where I've decided to stop blocking myself and just go with the stuff I know, as opposed to trying to teach myself a new technology on top of starting the stream, on top of creating the project. Alright, so Node uses something called npm to manage their packages, and I'm gonna go to Google because I forget how this works. So in order to create this, I want to first create a test website that I'm going to use this library on, and I'm going to do that using Express. I should probably put Node in there. This is a web application framework that lets you create a pretty quick web application using Node. When you get to programming, when you get to developing something, libraries kind of become your best friend. There's not a lot of point in building something that somebody else has already made better unless you're trying to learn how to use the program. Because when you get into things like security around user accounts and API tokens and all of that kind of stuff, there are so many libraries out there that let you do it so much better and account for a lot of the things that you would not think to account for. I used to be very anti-library because I just wanted to build everything myself, and now I use and abuse these. So I am going to, first off, go into this project folder using the command line here. I don't remember. Oh wait, we are on Windows. Sites. Yeah, I might get mixed up between Windows and Linux because my work computer is a Mac and it uses Linux commands, and this is a Windows, so it uses dir instead of ls. It's very annoying. I don't know why they chose to go with something else, but they did. And it is test site. Alright. So on this, I think there's a way to do it. Hold on. I thought there was a way to quick build, but we'll start from the ground up. I could have sworn there was a command that generated a lot of this for you, but I might be thinking of something else. Alright. I am running Windows 10, yes. Also, I might forget sometimes to switch between views, and I apologize in advance for that. I have two different views here, and I might sit on Google, so if you see that, feel free to call out in the chat, because I'm going to do that a lot. But basically, I've CD'd into my test project, and then I'm going to run this npm init command in order to create a package.json. So we're just going to call it test site. Oops. I guess we'll keep it the same as the directory name. Version 1.0, no description. Sure, why not? Yeah, you can just go through that with all the defaults. I agree, it should come up with an alias to ls because it drives me nuts. You know, they might... Hold on. Oh, there is one. Okay. PowerShell, I guess, does. I'm used to CMD. That does not, so apparently I can fat finger that and I'm fine. Cool, thank you. It's been a while since I've done any development on this computer. I actually recently just wiped it because I do that every year or so. I'll completely wipe my computer and restart. so I lost a lot of my in-progress projects that I was working on. But it does make it makes your computer run a lot nicer when you do that every once in a while, but it's very annoying to reset up everything on. Nice. Alright, I have my should in my, yes I do. Now you'll see I have my package JSON in here. It doesn't have any libraries yet because I haven't installed anything, but that is where things will start to install. So we're going to install Express. Luckily things here are pretty, oh, this is going to happen a lot too because I have hotkeys. I'm going to have to figure out how to bind my hotkeys in a way that is not tied to numbers. That was something I didn't think about before I actually started, or got close to starting, and noticed that when I type to switch windows, it shows up in the command line. So, alright, I have now Express in there, you can see. And now I am going to switch to Google again and look at how we start setting this up. Like I said, I work with Express every day at work, and I still have to look up in the documentation how all of this stuff gets started. You don't memorize this stuff. Documentation is there for a reason, and usually it's pretty well written, for the most part, but sometimes it just depends on who is developing the library. Usually when I decide what I'm going to use, documentation is actually a big part of the deciding factor in what I decide to go with versus what I do not. Alright, so switching back to our project here, I'm going to create an index. Actually, I'm going to name it server so that we know what we're running. And then I just copied and pasted that straight in. Eventually, I'll want to set up a lot of this using environment variables, things like the port, and a few other things. But for right now, this will work. So if we save that, then I go into my package.json, and I think, okay, good. It is ES5. JavaScript basically has a few different languages behind it. There's syntax for importing that's a little cleaner than the require, but it requires you to use something like Babel or some kind of like parser to translate it into Node, and I wanted to make sure that I did not need to do anything like that. So I'm going to create a server script that will basically npm run node server.js. Actually, I think I can just do server. I'll try that and see. Alright, so what that should do is when I am in my command, if I run npm server, npm run server. Alright. And it is running on localhost. I have to allow this through my firewall. So if I go to our browser here, and I switch over, and I refresh localhost on 300 or 3000, I have a website. Literally, that's it. A lot of people think that programming is super hard, super difficult, and like it is. There's a lot of problem solving. There's a lot of steps that go into learning and getting comfortable using things like the command line and writing code. But I swear, most of it is just knowing how to Google and knowing how to copy and paste. 99.9% of it. You can write a website knowing how to do that. Now that's writing code that's not writing good code, but you don't have to write good code in order to program. And that's one of the things that it took me a long time to figure out, because I was always hung up on how I was organizing things, how everything had to be perfect. And I didn't just let the goal be the more important objective, and then you can always go back and clean up later. You probably won't, but you can. So, yeah. But we have a website with this one file, and all it's doing right now is sending the text hello world to the server when we go to the root URL. If you don't have any experience with Express, this part can be a little bit of a learning curve, but basically the way Express works is it runs a server on a given port, and you tell it, based on your request types, what you want it to do when somebody hits those endpoints. So for things like GET requests, where all you're doing is hitting a page, typically you're either going to send text or you're going to send an HTML file, something like that. For things like POST requests, where you're actually sending data to the website, like form submission, that'll be when you do a lot of the logic behind like validating, all that stuff. So yeah, I might get a little, I wasn't sure where I wanted to get today, honestly. I did not plan this at all. Like in the least. I did not set up any kind of script or anything. I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna jump in, I'm just gonna start coding, I'm gonna start talking, it'll be fine. Who needs to plan these things? But I think I might go a little into Docker, because I really want to get that set up, and sooner rather than later, and it will let me easier get into some of the more interesting aspects of programming, because Docker is basically what I'm going to use to manage my technology stack for this project. Basically what it is, if you haven't heard of Docker, is it's a little like a virtual machine. So what you do is, in your project, you create a configuration file. And it's basically an inventory for your project. It's like, for this project, I'm going to use Node. I'm going to use a database. I'm going to use an Nginx server. Here's what I want all the values of all those things to be. And then you run that in a Docker container, which is like a virtual machine, but on your computer. You don't have to like partition or anything. And it will create that the same way every single time you run it. So if I'm getting started on a project that I haven't been working on before, and somebody's set it up in Docker, I can download their Docker build, run it, and it will install everything I need without me having to worry about installing everything separately. So it's a really nice setup, especially if you're looking to work in a team. And on this project, I kind of want to open source it in the future. I think it'd be really cool to open source it. So Docker would make it a lot easier for people to spin up and be able to develop on it alongside. So I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to set my project up a little differently here real quick in order to do that. Because right now I have everything in this test site directory. But if I'm creating a project and I want to be able to have multiple things in here, I probably want a project directory that my test site is going to live in. So I'm going to close out of this project and open a new one. Open folder, test project. Alright. And I'm going to go ahead and close out of the previous one. Sweet. Now I can move. I couldn't move the directory until I closed out of it. Now I can move test site into test project. Oh, I have to end my script that is running on it also. Oh my goodness. I do not remember what the command is. It's not control. Oh, there we go. It would not terminate this job. Alright, so I'm going to back out of this, go into test project, and then go ahead and hide that again. Okay, so now I'm in test project. I'm going to copy this test site into test project. So now I have a project folder that has my Express site within it. And now I'm going to create a new folder. I wish it would... I wonder if you can tell OBS to capture right clicks, because that would be nice. So I'm going to create a new file. And call it Docker file. And now we're going to go back to Google. Okay, so Docker files are fun. They're basically written in a format called a YAML. And so they can be written in either JSON or YAML. I prefer YAML because I'm just not a big fan of JSON format. I think they can be written in YAML. Let me go in here. I'm fairly certain that you can use YAML on a Docker file, but of course, now I'm second guessing myself, and that is going to happen a lot. Oh, I'm not thinking of a Docker file. What am I thinking of? Oh my gosh. We'll get back to it. I'm sure we'll come to it in the actual Docker Compose. That's what I'm thinking of. Okay. So yeah, Docker files look like this. They're just basically a script file for your Docker. Docker Compose is a library that you can use that makes spinning up Docker instances easier. So forget about that. You don't have to worry about that yet. I'm probably going to end up using it because I really like Docker Compose. It makes things easier, but for now, this is all we care about. All right, so I have a Docker file here that basically sets up a node instance. It's going to spin up a node version 12, which is what we're using. It's going to copy our package JSON into the container, because this is basically creating a temporary directory and building the project within that directory. So it bundles everything and then runs it. I actually might just start out with... This is the part of Docker I don't really like. What they do is they create this every time and they copy it. So it makes it hard to make changes locally and see them on your Docker container. Because essentially what it does is it creates a temporary directory in your computer, copies all of your files into that directory, builds your application code, and runs the server there. Which works really well for production, but when you're trying to make code changes and really quickly see them, it does not work so well. So I think we're going to end up using Docker Compose. So I'm going to go to Docker Compose. Haha. Here we go. Okay. So, see, this is using Node 7. This is an old... We don't want to use one that's using Node 7. We'll go into this one. Yeah, see, MongoDB is a really popular choice for Node.js, and I might look into it and I might end up using it. But I've never actually used it, so I don't know yet if I want to go with that, because I don't know if I want to use a new technology for this. But we'll see. Okay, so see, this is again using the Docker file, and I don't think we need it, but I'll at least reference the... Yeah. So this is the Docker Compose file. Is that really the first reference to it? Interesting. Okay. Well, this is what a Docker Compose file looks like. This format's called YAML, and it reminds me of Python, actually, because there's no semicolons, and everything is controlled via indent. Dashes mean that it's an array value, which I actually just learned recently. And this is basically an object with a key and a value. So all of this reference can be found in the actual Docker Compose documentation. It has all of the, where is it? Generally it has all of the oh, reference. There we go. Compose file reference. This is what I was looking for. So it has every available command over here and what they all do, and kind of how they relate to your actual Docker file. So Docker Compose is basically a wrapper for Docker, and it lets you skip the whole Docker file step if you want to, because in your Docker Compose, you can say what you want the image to be, which is the exact same thing that this Docker file is saying up here when it does the from. You can set the working directory using your Compose. You can set basically all of this using Compose. It's just a little easier to manage a bunch of containers at once. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to delete this because we don't need it. And I'm instead going to make a, oh, you don't like MongoDB? If you don't mind sharing why not and what you like better, I would be interested to hear, because I've never, so at work I am a front-end developer, so I don't have to worry about database reference. We have service, like PHP services that we call via API in order to access the database. I've never tried doing database management through NodeJS. So that is the one aspect of this that made me hesitate to use Node. But I feel like I don't know, it's a toss-up between that and the more modular, like, JavaScript feel, and I really like the way that JavaScript handles closures and stuff way too much. I tried using PHP namespaces, I hated it. And I don't really want to build this all object-oriented. I would rather stick with functional and use closure and not have to track 50 bajillion PHP namespaces. I have not heard of any of those things. That is something kind of funny when you start programming, and I'm sure you know that, but people think when you say, oh yeah, I build websites, or oh yeah, I'm a computer programmer, that you know everything about every technology ever. That is not the case. Oh, that's good to know. It gets upset if the disk space is less than 10 gigs. Ooh. My computer is not that beefy, and I don't want to pay a bunch for hosting. So I might have to do some more research before but that is really good to know. Oh, nice. That's awesome. Oh boy. This is going to happen a lot too. I forgot what I was doing. Right. Setting up a Docker Compose file. So I called it dockercompose.yaml. And I'm going to set it up basically, I'm going to open up the guides in another tab. Oh, I don't want Docker file. Oh my goodness. This is not... I was expecting it to just take me to the Docker Compose documentation, but I forget that the Docker Compose documentation is a subset of the Docker documentation. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and paste it into my Compose file. I am going to remap those number keys as soon as I can because this is going to get annoying real fast. I'm going to end up breaking stuff because I'm going to have random 2s and 3s hanging out in my code. Alright, so I'm going to leave this web because it is a website. I'm going to put it on 3000. And I'm, instead of going build is basically, when you say build, you're saying this is where my Docker file is, and this is where I want you to build this image. But I'm going to try and avoid, for simplicity, creating a Docker file for right now. So I am simply going to do image and give it whatever that image was. I'm not going to switch back. I'm just going to open the tab that it was on. It was Node 12. So I'm going to switch this image to Node 12. So that's saying I want a container, a Docker container called web. I want the image to be based on Node 12, and I want port 3000. I'm betting there's an Express image that we could use if you wanted to go higher level, but for simplicity, I'm just going with Node because we're installing everything we need to for Express anyway. And then for volumes, I'm going to go ahead and take test site, and I'm going to put it in I'll keep it consistent. Okay, so what this is doing essentially is Docker, when it creates a container, it creates storage. And when you talk about Docker storage in a container, you're talking about volumes. And these volumes can be two different kinds. Actually, it might be three, but the two most common ones are either a bind mount or, I don't actually know the correct name for the other one, I just call it a mount. But a full-on mount is, here's how I want this volume to begin, but that's it. Like, it creates that storage and then that storage doesn't change. So it's really useful for things like MySQL databases or things like, I don't know, storage that you don't want to change over the course of the containers running, or that you only want the application to change. You don't want any outside influence to have on it. Bind mounts, which is what I have here, is saying, I have this directory, test site, in my local. I want you to bind this directory to this location in the Docker container. So now anytime I make an update within test site, it's going to make that update within the container, which is super useful when you don't want to have to restart your container every time you want to see a change in your code. On our work environment, I actually set this up to where we have a separate Docker Compose for develop versus production, and our production uses regular mounts because we just build the code in the container, we're not updating it at all. And our develop one uses these bind mounts so that when I'm doing development, I don't have to take down the container and restart it every time. All right. I'm not using Redis, so I don't need any of that. And I have a volume. But I don't think that, you don't have to put bind mounts in your volumes because they aren't actually storage. Okay, so now I have my image, I have my code, I have my port. Now I need to tell it what I want it to do in that directory in order to run my code. So to do that, let me switch back to Google. I want to use Docker Compose. I want to see if this has a good example of it. But nope, it's got build. Yeah, no. This is just using nothing but build, so I'm going to go to here. Yeah, see, this is using it too. Alright, well, I know what the commands are, so I can look them up, but this is where if I was going through this using the documentation and I didn't kind of know what I was doing already, I would probably set this up using a Docker file, because the documentation is very obviously biased towards starting you out that way, where you set up your working directory, you set up your image, you set up your run command. But because I'm familiar, I'm skipping that, and I'm instead going to use two values, which is basically working dir right here. It's kind of funny that they just combine those all in one spot. Okay, so we're going to set our working directory to be test site for this service, because that is where we're putting our code. And then there's another one, I think it's CMD, but let me go verify that. Well, entry point. Entry point will work. So basically this is the command or the script or whatever that you want it to run in order to start out. So for me, it would be node. I don't have any flags. and oh, hold on, not node. I think I'm gonna try something. I don't know if you have to use let's try this. This might not work, but if not, we will make this an array of 3 separate. I never understood that notation. I don't know why they make it 3 separate, as opposed to just letting you put the script in. I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure it's a very good reason, but it makes no sense to me. So we're gonna see if this works, because logically it should, and sometimes I like to play around and break things in order to make my code look a little nicer. Okay, so now we've told Docker Compose that we want it to run our web service on port 3000, and we want it to run our test site, or run in our test site directory and use this entry point. And what this port means, as kind of a last note on this, is this service is going to be running a job on port 3000 that we want to be visible publicly on port 3000. I don't remember what order those go in, if this is the public and this is the private, or vice versa, but that is what that means. So, okay, now I should have if I go to our command prompt, unbind, and I go Docker Compose, and I say up, it's going to build an image. And this takes a while. This is a big part of the reason why stopping and starting containers every time you want to make a change is a really big pain. You don't have to do all of this download every single time, but Docker utilizes a lot of caching, and sometimes that can, oh, it needs to be an absolute path. Oh, that makes sense. We're not going there. I did a rookie mistake. Your working directory is not relative to your computer's directory. It is relative to your container. And see, on the container, it's absolute. So we want it to be absolute. Also, I'm going to make this a little smaller because it keeps going out of frame. There we go. Okay. Oh wow. All right. This is not liking me today. Okay, I don't know. For some reason, there we go. It keeps not wanting to register the fact that my keyboard is in my PowerShell. I'm wondering if that is something to do with OBS and having it running. But, okay, there we go. So, as you can see, we created our container, test_project_web_1, which is the directory name, the service name, and then a number. And we have our command, our output. So if I go to localhost 3000, and I refresh, yep, it is running. And I have another view, and this is really nice. This is one of the nice parts about Docker, is they have this dashboard. Let me see if I can get it. To display. I should have opened it before I... There we go. Maybe. Huh. Okay, well, this was tied. And now I'm not quite sure why it isn't showing up. Interesting. Oh well. I cannot show it today because for some reason it does not want to add it to the view, which is too bad because anyway. Okay. Well, Docker comes with a dashboard that basically lets you see. And it did not used to come with this by default, I don't think, on older versions, but now it does on Windows too. But it lets you see all of your containers that you have running and the status. And it's especially nice for Compose because one of the most powerful things about Compose is when you go in here, you can have as many of these services as you want. So like we have one web service, I could have 5 websites running, and all I have to do is say Docker Compose up and it'll start up all 5 of my websites and put them on different ports. So a lot of places will use this to manage like multi-server systems, and it's just a really nice way to basically maintain a whole lot of services with very minimal effort. And now that I've kind of through work started learning about things like Kubernetes, I have been using Docker a lot more heavily than I used to, despite the fact that setting it up on my computer was a pain because I swear, development hates Windows. People who write development tools do not write them with Windows users in mind. I've had a lot easier time setting up tools on Macs than I have setting them up on Windows. Alright, so we have Docker, we have our node, we have it running. Now, just to test and see if I know what I'm talking about, let's update this. And then, let's see if it updates when I refresh. It did not. I'm wondering, that's either I set up my Docker wrong, or Express does not hot reload like I was expecting it to. I know how to test that theory. I'm going to go into the Docker container and I'm going to npm run server. Oh, address is already in use. Okay. Nope, I can't just restart on the fly. Okay. Well, I'm guessing that might be something I need to look into a little more. Because if oh, you know what? I can Google it right now. Mac, I agree. After I was so dead set against Mac, all through high school, all through college, all through, you know, doing development. And then I started using it for work. And now I have such a hard time working on this computer. I almost tried to figure out if I could get OBS to cooperate on my laptop specifically so that I could stream using a Mac instead of a Windows. Because the Mac just, I don't know, it just makes a lot of things nicer. The only thing I will give Windows credit for that Mac does not do, and it drives me nuts, is Mac assumes that you don't want to know anything about the underlying file system. And I hate that. At least Windows, you can open up, you know, my documents and you can get basically anywhere. Mac, you have to use command line. Yeah. And I don't hate that because it makes you use command line, which is good to get into practice with. But at the same time, oof. I have not. I don't actually even know what that is. Windows subsystem for Linux. Do it. I will check it out. I guess the only problem I would see in that is this is my gaming PC. So I don't know how that plays with playing games. But I could partition if I really wanted to worry about it. Alright. Oh, okay. Oh, so it basically is a partition, kind of, but VM. Sweet. I will look into that and see if that will make things easier. Yeah. Windows isn't terrible, but I remember trying to learn Ruby on Rails briefly, like a few years back, just for fun. And I could not get it to even run a hello world on my Windows. Because there was some bug in like the Ruby code, or I don't even know, but it took me about 3 or 4 hours of just banging my head against a brick wall trying to get the hello world to work. And I ended up just not even, I gave up on the language. I was like, this is not worth it. But yeah, fair. All right, so I forgot what I was gonna, oh, Node. I want to see if Express okay, so it does look like you might need something. So if I stop this container, and if I restart it, then I should see my changes. So I'm gonna have to implement some kind of Express hot reload because I'm not going to stop and start my container every time I want to see changes. because it takes a while. If you could see my dashboard, you would see that it has been starting for some time. And it is still starting. Oh, you know, I think it might have died. Okay. So I'm going to use the command line because y'all don't have eyes on the dashboard. The dashboard is convenient, but it is not the end all be all. So, okay, docker compose down. Okay. Oh, it's erroring. Oh, see? What did I say? I'm gonna have these random numbers holding over, breaking everything. It's because on this computer, I wanted to have a setup where I could hotkey between my various views and not have to worry about casting my entire window, because I don't know, like, I feel like it is a smoother experience, but at the same time, yeah, doing them to the number pad was not a very inspired decision for me. So this is part of the learning as you go. Okay, now if I hit up, it should go. Yep, and I probably have my changes. I do not. Okay, yeah, something with Docker is caching. Because it should, oh, no, my changes didn't save. One more time. This time for the wind. For the wind. Okay. Do I see my change? Yes. Okay. So I am getting my changes. It's just not hot reloading. So I'm going to need to install something like this in order to automatically reload without bringing it down. Usually when I'm looking at a package like this, there's a couple of things I look for. The first is there, yes, right here. So the first thing I look at is downloads. A lot of downloads. So activity looks good on this. Its last published was 2 years ago, which isn't great, but it's like a simple thing, so it might not need a lot of maintenance. And then also, issues. I always look at the issues. And the only issue is updating a third-party dependency, so cool. So this is a good potential thing to use for hot reloading if I wanted to not have to redo. So, you know what? I think I am going to go ahead and do that. Because I'm lazy. Okay, so this. Oh wait, do I have to use, oh no. I don't love that setup. I wonder if there is a cleaner way to do this. No. Node hot loader. Yeah, see, Webpack. Alright, well, we'll worry about this later, because the thing that kind of gets me is it looks like you're going to have to define a lot of like the paths you want to reload, and I'm not super interested in that. And this also might be a non-issue eventually, because I'm planning on developing the front end using React for this website, this test website that I'm building. So, and that comes pretty well bundled with hot module reloading. So this might be a non-issue, but I do not love the fact that I have to restart my Docker container. So I think for now, probably what's going to happen is locally, unless I'm running something that needs like the MySQL server and all of this other stuff, I will probably just do it the old-fashioned way, which is running it directly from the command line. Oh, yeah, it's gonna yell at me because I'm in the project and not in the directory. Okay, cool. So, I don't really know what to do next, so let's find out. Let's set up, ooh, see the Docker Compose YAML? Sure. Yeah, this can get pretty you know what we can do? No, because I don't need to worry about Nginx yet. And I don't need to worry about a database just yet, because I do want to, and I'm going to take that research offline, but I want to do a little bit of reading, and I can talk when I come back about why I chose what I chose to go with, but I do want to do a little bit of research into some of the options for database and Node, because legitimately new territory. So for now, I think this is the only service that we really need. But eventually, what this will probably end up looking like is I'll have my website, I will have my Nginx server, which will basically take this port 3000 and port it through port 80 so that it's running on an actual, on like localhost itself, so that we can run it on a domain versus having it just be on a port. It'll have a MySQL service. It'll have a potentially a socket handler, because I want this project to incorporate real-time updates in some capacity. I don't really have a use case for it, but I really like playing with them. Oh, okay, cool. That is good to know. I'll have to look into the syntax then. I'm picky about my syntax. I don't like it when it does too much for me, because I like to set things up the way I like to set them up. But if it doesn't do too much for me, I might, because that is by far the easiest one to find documentation for. unless there is one that I'm mistaken on, but it is the main one that I see. All right. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new folder in here. And I'm going to call it for now, I'm just going to call it library. But that name might change. But this is the main reason, this separation is the main reason why I decided to go with NodeJS as a language. Basically what I'm going to have this end up looking like, for local development, it's just going to be a local package, but eventually I want this to be a separate repository that I'm pulling dependencies from. And this is basically going to be the main functionality that sites can share. Some of what this is going to include is going to be users, log in, log out, user management, shop things. So like, I'm going to include integrations for PayPal, Stripe, Shopify, a few other things so that people can have an online shop pulling from one of a good deal of sources. I want to have blogging capability and the ability to cross-post blog articles across a variety of different social media. And I want to tie users into a few different popular funnels. The main idea behind what I'm trying to build here is I want to make it easy for people who have Patreons, who have streams, who have online shops to manage everything from one hub versus having to go through 5 or 6 different sources or hack together a Squarespace or hack together, something that just isn't built for that. Because I feel like it's a niche market where you have all these small creators trying to basically build a platform, but they don't have a platform to build a platform on. They're building it across a whole bunch of platforms, and it's a pain to manage. So that's kind of the thought behind this. It will never be paid. It will never be anything like that. I want to open source it, but it'll be for people to use if they have a little technical know-how and want to build something versus trying to use Squarespace or something. I have not done any Discord bot projects with Node.js. I want to explore it, but I have not actually looked much into it. I know it's probably API based, I would imagine. And I'm betting that there is an NPM package that makes it easier, which is amazing. I love the tech space. Typically, out of all of the spaces I've been in, it is one of the most open. Oh yeah, I've never heard of BotKit, but okay, Discord.js library. I'll look into it, but yeah, the API might be the easiest way to do it too. And that's kind of what the idea behind this library is it's either going to, which is what I was about to do actually, it's either going to import its own packages, or it's going to build packages. So it's going to be basically a wrapper for all of the functionality that these sites are going to share, but it's going to make it easier to use, is the goal for this. So there will probably be like a user module that lets you do login, log out, set up your authentication routes, all that stuff. But also choose like, I want my users to authenticate via Twitter or via YouTube or via Discord. I don't know if they have an OAuth. I want them to be able to connect via Patreon. You know, stuff like that. Stuff that the packages aren't going to give you because packages are trying to do everything. But at the same time, it's a very common use case for this set of people. So, but yeah, if the Discord JS library doesn't work, then I'll just set up a module in here that will let me access the API and do it a little easier. So, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and get ahead of it and also create my .env file. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna have my common environment values. So, I don't know what to call this one. I'll just call it server port for now. Okay. I'm not convinced. Yeah, I think that's right. And the nice part about this is Docker Compose will pull this file's contents and populate it in the container for you. So that is super nice. And then we can update our server.js to use that value. Now, this is the bare minimum of organization. And it is not particularly well implemented yet. Something that you probably want to do is have some kind of wrapper around this that caches all of your environment values, because accessing the process environment can be pretty costly when it comes to performance. So one of the neat parts about Node and JavaScript in general is when you create something in the global scope, it basically caches itself for the duration of that job. So right here we're only calling it once and it's fine. But if we were calling it in a bunch of places, we could create an object that's basically a copy of this process environment value and cache it, and then use that object to access our environment values. And that's also useful because then you can get away from this and actually make things type safe. Which is nice, especially because I am going to pretty quickly be translating this into TypeScript, because I really like TypeScript as a language. It makes Node a lot easier to work in. Actually, I was planning on ending this around 8, so I think that'll be the last thing I do. Is I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a TypeScript project. I don't have a how and why, sure. medium's usually a pretty good. And if you'll notice, I tend to just skip by all of this. Like, people do a really good job writing all of this language about like how they got into it, why they got into it. But if you know already, like, I want to use this, I'm set on it, then you can pretty much scroll down to the examples and it'll show you how to set things up. So right here. So I want to install TypeScript. And I can talk a little bit about what TypeScript is while I set this up, because I don't know how familiar all of y'all are with it. TypeScript is basically a wrapper for Node.js. It's not really a framework per se. It's like a wrapper language. I'm trying to think of something to equate it to. I can't think of a good comparison to draw. I guess, what is the PHP language that Facebook create? Hack. Hack is probably the best comparison. But it's basically a new way to write types, or Sass, there we go. It's like a processed version of Node. So it basically lets you do things in JavaScript that JavaScript isn't supposed to be able to do. Like define types and throw errors when your types aren't correct. And do nicer imports than the requires. Kind of like what I was saying earlier, where we have these imports up here that look a lot different than the imports I'm using here. So it's just a nicer way to write things and to use like annotation to really see what's going on in your code. So it's really nifty and it really keeps your code a lot safer if you're working with a bunch of people. We were using Flow previously at work, and we found that because it's optional, we just weren't remembering to put it on our files. And also Flow is a lot less globally used than TypeScript, so it's a lot harder to find documentation for. So, alright, we have TypeScript that we are installing. I'm going to do it in the test project. I don't want to get into doing it on there just yet, but both will be TypeScript eventually. Install, save, TypeScript. Alright, cool. Added one package. And then we are going to run this command that they tell us to run, which is this tsc. Which is basically the TypeScript command line. So I will add that script to my, oh my gosh. Yeah, I am remapping these keys ASAP. I might figure out a different way to do this because I think OBS is getting confused as to what's me actually typing and what is me trying to switch windows. Okay, so we want to go into our package.json. We want to add a script. We want to call it I'm going to be a little particular. There we go. It organizes the packages already for you in alphabetical, so I like to do my scripts in alphabetical too. Makes it easier to find things. Okay, and sometimes it will fail if you add trailing commas to a JSON file. So I tend to avoid doing that. Okay, so we have a TSC, and then it told us to run npm run tsc. And the reason why you do this double flag is when you want to pass a flag to an npm run command, you have to preface it with the double dash. So normally this would be just tsc -- init, but because we're doing npm run tsc, we have to do the double flag before, which was something else I learned pretty recently, just from watching the way other people do things. Okay, so now we have our tsconfig, which has a lot of defaults. A lot of defaults commented out, which I do not love, but you know, it is kind of nice that it tells you basically what all of these things do, though. That is pretty neat. I've never generated a tsconfig like this. Normally I just copy and paste it from tutorials. Cool. Right now, I don't think we need anything other than this. So we do want common.js. What this is saying is we want it to work in Node as well as in JavaScript. Targets ES5, which is the require syntax. I think Node, as of version 12, might natively support ES6, which added basically what that adds is you're able to do this arrow notation, and I think it added a few other things, but so obviously it works without running it through, so yeah, it does natively support it. So we could target ES6, but I'm going to just leave it as ES5 because I don't think it makes a difference. Alright, and we're going to skip the library check, and I don't think I need to uncomment anything else for now. We'll find out. So if I go back to that, scan initializes creating the tsconfig.json. Cool. Oh, we do have to do an out directory for the transpiled. Okay. Yeah, we'll do the same thing they did. We'll do build. That's a pretty standard way to do it. Sometimes it's best to stick with the standard, because if you try and get too fancy and too customized, people kind of wonder where things are. Whereas a lot of the standards exist because everyone who builds Node projects basically expects there to be a build directory where all of your compiled code gets put. It's either build or dist, depending on what your preference is. I actually might do dist because that is more natural for me, but either one of those two. Okay, and then we go to, we already installed Express. We don't have to worry about that step. We do have to worry about this step where we install our types. Oops. I don't remember if that was a save dev or a save. Oh, it's actually a save. Okay. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. What this is basically expecting us to do is it's expecting us to use this tsc command, the TypeScript compiler, to run our code. So it's going to be compiling in runtime. So that's why it wants you to use save. if you are pre-compiling your code and you're just sending already built code up to the server in order to run it in production, then all of your types can be dev dependencies because your production code doesn't need them to run. But for now, we will do it the way they're doing it. Typically, for performance reasons, I think people tend to pre-compile their code and then ship it because it's just a little easier on your tools and it uses less memory and such. But when you get into that world is where I'm kind of just talking out of no real formal experience. It's just kind of from my understanding of TypeScript and the way compilers work. So if I ever say something wrong and somebody in here knows that I am saying something wrong, please do correct. All right, now I have that installed. And now it has the same hello world. I wonder where they got that from. Alright, so they're creating a folder called app in which they create a file called app.ts. I am not going to do that because my entire project folder is app.ts. So I'm going to leave my root server and then just know that the built is where, or the dist is where all of my actual non-TypeScript code is going to go. So yeah, see, they're still using this because they're not using I'll have to see that's a later step. But yeah, they're still using the require syntax, which is fine. So import express from, or import express equals, that's confusing. Huh. I don't think I've ever seen that notation. Import express equals require express. Normally it's either variable or constant express equals require express, or it's import express from express. I have never seen them combine like that. Interesting. Anyway, learned something new. So what they're doing is they are creating a new application, which is type express application, and they're setting it equal to our instance of express. So I can go in and rename this file to server.ts. Oh. I'm gonna have to save with caution. I'm going to leave this const because, but I can do that now, and now we have a type. And if I had TypeScript add-ons set up in here, which I don't think I do. Let me look real quick. In settings, I don't think I have any kind of, oh, I do have the language support. This is something that I would definitely suggest getting to know your editor very well, because it can make your job a lot easier or a lot harder depending on what editor you're using and what you're doing. Okay, this is probably what I want to use. So I'm going to install this. It might have me restart Atom. I'm going to find out. Oh, I left the... Okay, cool. So that is installed. Yes, install that dependency. This might take a minute. But while that installs... Yeah, see, there you go. It's starting to get some type information. But I'm not sure. What might happen is I'm not sure if Atom updates in real time with the types that you install. So I might have to close out and reopen in order to see express types information since I just installed that. I'm not quite sure how this handles refreshing, but cool. All right, I'm gonna try closing the file and then reopening. Yeah, there we go. See, now you're seeing a lot more information about what I'm potentially doing wrong, like the fact that we no longer have a port. And how you can fix that. So, pretty nice. It does not look like it can find Express. It looks like this might be able to handle imports. So we're gonna try this. And yeah, now it knows what it is. So now it knows that Git is on application and that it does all of this stuff. So, super handy. All right, and now to finish up, we need to update our run. Whoops. I don't know why it, oh. Why do they have it to where you can, anyway. Apparently you need a hotkey to tweet this code. Alright, so they just want you to npm run tsc, but I'm pretty sure in order to do that, we would have to set our entry point. Unless I'm mistaken. That might be the default. Let's go in and look at our Typescript file, because I named mine server.ts and I put it in the root. And this, the root directory is in the root, is right here. And I'm wondering if there is a... Oh, you know what I think it does? I think it uses your main. So in here we have a main. I think we have to set that. Okay, let's try this and see if it works. All right, we created a dist and it has a server. So what this is doing is basically it's creating a JavaScript version of whatever we put in here. Because if we tried to run right now, let's say we did, let me close this, don't save. Let's say in our package.json, we still wanted to run server. If we run that, it's gonna fail because it does not know how to read that. Whereas, even if I put in .ts, I'm pretty sure it still is like, how do you do that? Yeah, cannot use import statement outside of a module. So, if we run though, dist server, and then run npm run server, there we get it. But there we run into a problem because when we compiled this code, right? It compiled using process.environment.server port. But, oh, never mind. I know what I did. Never mind. Ignore that. I'm getting work confused with this project again. The reason why that's undefined is because our .env is outside of the directory. At work, we're trying to juggle server compiled code and client compiled code, and the client compiled code does not have access to process.environment, so I was thinking that was an issue here, but it is not. So basically what I would have to do is I would have to either change the root directory or move this into here. And I think for now I'm going to move this into here because I would rather be able to run it from in there. Oh wait. No, never mind. This is the problem. You need to set your, I believe, TSC might have a different way of setting environment variables than Node has. I wonder. That'll be something to look into. Why am I... Because in my mind, right, I move this into here. I'm running the command in here. Oh, I would need to run it in here, potentially. Which is not an option, so I'm gonna have to see if there's a way to... No, see, that doesn't even work. Yeah, I'm not sure why the environment isn't showing up, because it is using the exact same access, right, that it was before. So it should be getting the exact same environment variables that it was before. And that was not undefined before, I don't think. But weird. If you all see anything that I'm not, let me know. I was gonna see if there's a way, if they have an example. Okay, well here is, oh, switching over. Oh, here's the, remember when I was saying that hot module reloading might become obsolete? Guess what this does? It reloads your code for you in a much easier way than the previous one, so that paid off. And that's where sometimes if you see something getting a little complicated, it sometimes helps to jump to a different part of the project that is a little better defined, that doesn't rely on that complicated piece, and you might find out that the work you were going to do doesn't matter anyway. Which is part of why I'm holding off on the database creation and on the Nginx Docker creation, because I don't know yet what this is going to look like entirely, so I don't know if I'm going to actually need those containers. So, alright. I'm going to really quick look up TSC Env. Yeah, see, you're supposed to be able to use process.environment. Huh. I wonder if it's something with anyway, I think there's a way, so if I move this back out and put it in my test project, because I kind of want this entire project space to be able to share the same environment variables. I don't want to have to redefine them 7 or 8 different times, depending on how many web applications I get going in here, because then it's very easy to see, okay, test site has a server port of 3000, but then I can add a WebSocket port and make it 3001. And then you can see at a glance what all the ports are being used rather than having to go into each individual one. But I think there's a way when you run node where you can define your .env. I know that you can define the variables. But I could have sworn that there was a way when you run a node script to state what environment file you want. Location. I don't want .environment. Okay, so node server.js, node environment, okay. Yeah, this whole, you don't want to ever check in your environment variables, generally to a Git repository. there might be sensitive information in there, although if you're really doing things correctly, you won't have any sensitive information in here either. You'll keep that in a separate, like, secrets area. Most web hosts, if you're doing anything with Docker, I think tend to provide secrets that they'll encrypt for you so that you're not dealing with a file full of, like, all of your passwords or all of your API keys or all of your anything. But yeah, typically you don't check in your .env because you want it to vary by environment anyway, by definition. But yeah, I'm not sure how to... I could have sworn there was a way to, on the command, when you run a node script, set the location of your... Because most of your scripts give you a way to do it. Oh, there we go. Experimental, enable. Oh, and then just environment variables. So apparently there is not, which is pretty dumb, if you ask me. But then again, maybe it just doesn't load. I might be mistaken, and you might actually have to use .environment to even load them in. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And that'll probably be my last thing. So, in order to... I could have sworn that port was defined before, but now I'm kind of thinking it was not. So if I do npm install save.environment, all right, and then I'll go in here and I'm going to go ahead and load this because I intend to use this .environment like no matter what I'm in, even in production. So I don't think I need to add this flag. All right. I think though, because we're doing TypeScript, there we go. Cool. Now, if I run it, oh, still undefined. Oh. Because oh, okay, yeah. So we want to run TSC and then run server. Nope, still undefined. Wow. I'm gonna do some looking at this, and this might be a good talking point later, because I get the feeling what's happening, and this is gonna happen every time I'm gonna get into the weeds, because this is always what happens when you're working on a coding project, and this is the process that I'm intending to show with this entire stream, is you'll run into an issue like this, where something's happening that you aren't expecting, and you generally learn something from it. So what I think is happening is in here, I think that we're going to have to do something else in order to use this dot environment. So, which is fine because all of this should be pulled out into separate files anyway. Like, I'll probably have a server folder and then have a section for setting up the environment variables, have a section for setting up some of our routes, and basically organize this a little better to where it's not just all in one file. Because as you get to 7, 8, 9, 10 routes, this file gets very long. So probably next time I'll get into routing. I will finish up this dot environment and I will start working on some of these lib packages and talk a little bit about scoping, like keeping things modular, and just kind of build this project. That's basically it. I don't have a whole lot of formal expectations for these streams. It's literally just going to be me talking through the process of coding, talking to y'all in chat. Thank you for being here. I was actually not expecting anyone to be here. So the fact that a few of you are in here talking to me, kind of made my night, which is amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's basically it. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. It might be next Wednesday. It might be not next Wednesday. I don't know. I want to create a schedule, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm consistent enough to do that. But thank you so much. Good night. Have a good night.